Yo, what's up, everyone? And welcome to episode 51 of Buzzer Beaters. I am Eddie Aparicio, and this is my co host, Anthony Twan Corral. And we are brought to you by grumblingsmedia.com. You can find us at grumblingsmedia.com, as well as any other popular podcast outlet you can think of, such as YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, X, Facebook, you name it, you can find us. Just whatever suits you. Just go ahead and type in grumblingsmedia.com. And we are live. We are live every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And we are here for a purpose. It's because we want to hear from you. We want to go ahead and take your questions. We want to take your comments. If you weren't here last week, we had our 50th episode, which is a milestone episode. And we had a special guest, none other than former 49er, former UCLA great JJ Stokes. If you haven't listened into it, it was a good conversation. We learned a lot about JJ's background, about how he got into the NFL. I think that was an interesting journey. How he could have played at UCLA basketball wise. That was an interesting journey. And then kind of gave us some tales about certain individuals within the NFL, like certain colorful personalities within the NFL. And I thought that was a really good conversation. Just go ahead and tune in if you haven't listened to that yet. But anyway, if this is your first time, we go ahead and go about an hour to hour and a half. Lately, it's been an hour and a half consistently now. I used to try and get this within an hour, and I don't think we can do it anymore, bro, right? And I think for sure today, we are not going to we might even go over an hour and a half just because, we have the main topics we're going to talk about is we know that the finals are upon us, right? But we haven't covered how we got to that point. We haven't covered, the elimination games, where the Wolves and the Knicks got eliminated to get to this point where it's now the Thunder versus the Pacers. We're going to go ahead and cover, what happened. And then, of course, shortly, we just heard about the news yesterday that Tom Thibodeau got fired, right? So we're going to probably talk a little bit about that, as we talk about the elimination slides for each of these teams. And then, we have this other little kind of quick fantasy segment where we kind of show kind of the performance of all the players that have been in the playoffs and kind of show you from a fantasy points perspective who are the leaders from a fantasy points per minute standpoint. We show the leaders of that. And then that'll be it. Then we're going to dovetail into something that Twan and I had created about a month ago. And it's this player greatness index. And I think it's been well received by the audience here that, we came up with this objective way of determining who are the greatest players of all time. And we unveiled this process about over a month ago. But then 2 weeks ago, because we had our 50th episode last week, we didn't initially cover this, but we talked about it with JJ, and he thought it was a really good idea, an interesting idea. But 2 weeks ago, we went ahead and we went over the NBA 75th anniversary team, and there was a subjective ranking that they came out with. And then we wanted to go ahead and see what our PGI process player greatness index shows in comparison to what the subjective number or subjective rankings say to versus what the objective rankings say. So we went ahead and did that 2 weeks ago for players number 61 through 75. Today, we're going to go through the rest of it, right? We're going to go all the way and unveil the top 10 players of all time according to our index. And then you're going to see the comparison of the ESPN rankings. So it's interesting because we're going to essentially kind of call out a little bit ESPN. What are their criteria, right? Because there's a lot of deltas from, our list to ESPN's list. And again, we're just going to cover only the top 76 players of all time. Now, next week, we're probably going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the finals, of course, because that's good. The games have already started next week, right? But then the draft is coming up. The NBA draft is coming up on Wednesday, June 25th. So Twan and I have essentially 2 weeks to cover all 30 teams. So Twan and I will go ahead and cover 14 teams next week, and then we're going to go ahead and cover 16 teams the week after that. That'll lead up to our more than likely going to have a live draft show, right? We haven't talked about that yet, guests and so forth, but that's probably what we're going to do. And we'll be here spending the time to talk about reactions to each draft pick and so forth. So hopefully we can join us. Again, we're here live every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So Twan, I laid out the agenda, but Twan, before we get into it, man, what's been going on with you, bro? How you been, man?
I've been all right. I've been recovering from a little bit of I think it was a cold. So, you'll see me mute myself here from time to time and cough. Eddie, as I was, and again, I don't, this is, I tend to take us off topic. And
All right, man. It's good.
I tried to, but I found something a little fascinating as you were talking about the PGI index.
Yeah.
And we had previously stated, that this is transferable
Yes.
to other sports.
Other sports, right.
But the interesting part is basketball, and I would say soccer and maybe hockey are similar in the way that you would measure greatness. But in baseball and football, it's a lot more challenging, because how do you measure a defensive player against an offensive player, right? So in football, you have, and then in baseball, how do you compare a pitcher against a hitter, right? They don't have the same stats. So that would be a much more challenging task.
Yeah, I think what we'd have to do if we want to create some kind of transferable PGI for these other sports is that, for pitchers, because they normally don't get the at-bats, right? Because you have the two leagues, right? Before there used to be national and American. Now you have DH in both, right? But so now you would have to essentially rank the top, 50 or 100 pitchers, and then the top 50, 100 position players. That's probably you're gonna have to do that. You can't roll them all up together, right? It's gonna be too hard. But it'd be interesting because you come up with some kind of index rating for like someone like a Nolan Ryan, for instance, and then you want to see how that index compares to someone like a Willie Mays, right?
Yep.
Both highly regarded players for each of their positions, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's interesting.
So what I was thinking is, it's cool that in this unique position, the NBA, we can really measure apples to apples.
Right.
There is a lot of measurables against all the players that are on the court. So I just kind of was chewing through that in my head, and I thought that was pretty cool. But in terms of how I've been, like I said, been trying to recover a little bit, doing house chores, little stuff like that. Basketball's been down now because we've been without hoops for like 3 or 4 days now. Yep. So that's been.
It comes back on Friday though.
It comes back
again on Friday.
Tomorrow, I believe it's tomorrow.
Yeah, it's the 5th. It starts on June 5th. So
that's tomorrow.
Is that tomorrow? Yeah,
that's tomorrow.
It is. Man, I'm all messed up on my. It is tomorrow. You're right. The Thursday.
June 5th. Yeah. So that'll be.
I'm all messed up on the time, man. So
you know what I like. If my team can't be in it, I always like to vote for an organization that's never won it. So
that's the Pacers, baby.
And both the organization and the Thunder have never won it.
You're right. But you know what? The Thunder organization are really the Seattle Supersonics, right? And the Seattle Supersonics did win one. I forgot what year it was, in the 70s. But you're right. As far as the Oklahoma City Thunder as a franchise, that's no longer Seattle Supersonics. You're right. They have not won one yet.
Yeah.
So
no matter what, we're going to get a fan base that is experiencing a championship for the first time.
Right.
And both, as you and I both stated, we've adopted the Indiana Pacers because they remind us so much of our early year Run TMC Warriors. They just remind us of that crew. So we've kind of adopted, and the colors don't hurt. They're blue and gold like the Warriors.
Pretty similar, right?
So 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 we're kind of rooting for them. But honestly, whoever wins, kudos to them. The Thunder should win, I think. But in any case, we'll see how that goes.
Hey, when we talk about it, we'll talk about it when we get there, but it'll be interesting to see how many games this series will go, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the NBA probably did not want this finals to happen because they're two small market teams, right? They were hoping and praying that the Knicks would get there, right?
Yep.
But the Knicks didn't get there, and we'll talk about that when we get there, right? But I just we're gonna see what kind of ratings this finals gets. The diehard basketball fans like you and I, we're going to be watching, right? Because you have two compelling, you have one very offensive oriented team in the Pacers, and you have one defensive oriented team in the Thunder. Record the net rating that we have in NBA history with a 12.9 rating, right? Which is 1.2 better than the Celtics did 2 years ago, right? So, it was last year. But anyway. But Twan, let's get into it, bro. Let's get into it. So you have the slides, right? You have the slides?
I am good to go. Yep.
All right, man. So we're going to go ahead and talk about first the Thunder win. They won the series over the Wolves, and it was 4-1. And I know Twan's going to go ahead and punch up. So this is what, and hopefully cool. It doesn't cover too much. All right. So anyway, we wanted to talk about the games that led up to the finals that are going to be taking place tomorrow. So you can see here that, the last, in game 3, the Wolves won, and they won in a convincing fashion. And that's interesting that how these basketball games can go, where a team can get blown out and then come back and kick the other team's butt, the other way, right? And we all, when the Wolves won Game 3, we're like, oh wow, this is going to be interesting because we all knew that the Wolves are a very talented team, right? They took out the Warriors, of course, a Stephless Warriors team, but they were a team that could create problems because they have this budding superstar in Anthony Edwards, right? Then you combine that with guys like Naz Reid, who actually had a really good series, right? Then you had guys like Julius Randle, who actually got shut down, I think, by the Thunder. You thought that, okay, this is going to be an interesting series. But I think what happened here, bro, is that, Julius Randle being an offensive force, and then you have Anthony Edwards being an offensive force. But what happened is that the Thunder are so versatile from a defensive standpoint. They threw a bunch of bodies at Anthony Edwards and totally made him a facilitator. They made everybody else beat, the Thunder. They took away Anthony Edwards and they took away Julius Randle. I mean, the length of the Thunder definitely created problems for the Timberwolves. And the Jaden McDaniels of the world and the Michael Collins of the world and Naz Reids of the world. They had the load to try and bring this team back because the other two stars of their team were shut down. So, what are your thoughts, bro?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that the Thunder are so deep, and they rely on so many different players. Which was pretty much very different than the previous series against the Warriors. Not only was Steph out, but the rotation and the defensive capability of the Warriors were really limited as to what they could do to stop the Wolves. And so the Wolves really had a lot of free reign, in particular Julius Randle. He seemed to have an easier time. And when he's hot, then everything else kind of just crumbled. And in this series, the Wolves, the Thunder really did a good job of attacking Anthony Edwards on the defensive end and forcing Julius Randle and everyone else just as much as they did. Dante DiVincenzo has now had a couple of seasons where his postseason stats are a little lower than his regular season stats. I don't want to say like the big C word, like the choke word or anything like that. But he's definitely less effective in a couple of different series now.
Right.
And so that hurt him a little bit. And the thing that we're going to hear between this series and the other series is the depth. Thunder just has a lot of depth, a lot of energy. They just keep coming at you. Yep. And what's interesting is in the previous series, there was a game where the Nuggets blew out the Thunder too by I want to say 30 something. Yep. So this is kind of now becoming a little bit of a trend in the series. So we'll see if that continues. But Minnesota was able to save face on their first home game. I think they won by close to 40. I mean,
they did. They went over by 40. I think 41 or 42 points.
Yeah, and so that game was over pretty much by halftime. But the depth here is really the thing, and I'm curious. As we kind of begin to transition as the finals end, I'm always curious when you have a deep team, how much are they going to be able to keep all of these players going into the next year or two? Due to the salary cap, cap restrictions, and of course, everyone knows the Thunder's got so many first-round picks coming in the next, 2 to 5 years or
crazy,
something.
Man, how many picks? I think like 14.
I thought I read somewhere it was like 20-something first-round picks in the next.
It's amazing. I mean, this team is built to be a dynasty for the next 10 years. They have the draft picks, and that essentially will fill in the voids of some of these players that are probably going to get, their payroll is going to be too high where they can't afford a lot of these players, right? They're just going to backfill it with some of these young guys that they keep drafting. Now, we'll see if the talent's there to be able to do that in the drafts that are upcoming, right?
Yeah, and the Thunder has been an organization that's drafted really well, but they have their big three, right? Jalen, Chet, and SGA. So that's their big three. Yep. Dort is a really fantastic player, and I'm sure
very good defender.
There's a lot of teams that would be willing to pick him up. Hardenstein, they just signed him, so I think they signed him to a 3-year deal. So he's got a couple more years going on there. But everyone else, Wiggins, the other Jalen Williams, those players, Caruso. We're going to see what happens with some of those players as they begin picking up these first-round picks that they have in the next year or two. But as of right now, very deep team, in my opinion. Even though sentimentally, the Pacers, if I'm betting money, I'm betting on the Thunder to win this series, the NBA Finals.
The upcoming series against the Pacers.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that when we get there. But one thing I want to note here. So the Warriors, when they won their first championship, 2014, 2015, they changed kind of the NBA. NBA teams all started trying to replicate the Warriors recipe or formula, right?
Yes.
Shooting, right? Spread the floor, right? For the last 10 years, that's what a lot of the NBA GMs have done, is trying to find shooters and try and replicate the Warriors game. Slowly over time, though, in the last 2 to 3 years, you saw teams starting to try and be bigger, athletic, right? And then what you see now is what I think is going to be the trend that the Thunder have started is defensive oriented teams, bringing back, the attitude of the 80s, right? Some of these, rough and tough teams, even though they're not they're more of a finesse team, but they just defense the crap out of you, man, right? Yep. So I think that's what's going to happen is a lot of GMs are going to start trying to draft players that are similar to the Thunder's players with respect to length and defensive tenacity, because they can see that a team who has a very, very good defense can definitely create their own offense. And that's something that, teams have a lot of coaches have preached in the past, but it never really came to fruition. You saw it in spurts, but this team, that's what they do all the time, man. This is what they do. They just turn you over, run and gun, and they can shoot, right? We talked about the Rockets. The Rockets and Thunder are very similar. The difference being is that the Rockets can't shoot. The Thunder can. But I would say that the Rockets are probably even stronger defensively, in my opinion.
I would say the same thing,
for sure. But that's the trend.
And to kind of add to your point, the big 3-and-D guys, it's a byproduct of the fact that so many teams are trying to accumulate shooters, and the 3-point line has become such a weapon that you need a defensive team, not only that can play defense, but that can recover from one end of the 3-point arc to the other, right? So they need somebody that can. So with that's the Thunder's magic, right? Everyone's 6'7", 6'8". They run like deer. So when they're on one end of the court and the ball gets swung over, boom, you see this whole like wave of Thunder just kind of going to the other side, and they still can't shoot. There's still no opening, and that's really, I agree with you. That's the defensive capabilities that I think teams are trying to capture. Those big 3-and-D guys.
Yep. And that's going to continue to be the trend. So anyway, so the Thunder win this series, 4 games to 1. That means that the Wolves are now eliminated. We can go to the next slide. And this is kind of what I'm going to go ahead and cover here is, the Wolves are now eliminated. And, what we do is come up with this elimination slide. We kind of want to do some analysis of who the Wolves are, right? And what you're seeing here is the offensive rating, defensive rating, and net rating only for the playoff run, right? We have, next week when we talk about the pre-draft, we'll go ahead and show the regular season ratings. These are just the playoff ratings that you see right here. So they were 5 across the 5th out of 16 teams across the board in all the different categories from a analytics standpoint, right? So they're a strong team for sure, right? But the thing is that, as I'll cover here, that their strengths right here. Their strengths are Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is a budding star. We know that. What's interesting, though, is that the length.
I don't even know how much he's budding still, Eddie. He may already just be the star.
I think there's too much budding left. But he's so young, man. I mean, he's not. I mean, a lot of people compare him to Jordan, right? We saw Jordan play. We saw how tenacious Jordan is from a defensive standpoint. This guy's not there yet, right? No, so that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of room for him to improve on that end, right? From an offensive standpoint, you could argue that he's on par, maybe even a little bit better. The only reason I say a little bit better is because he can shoot the 3. I mean, Steph Curry called him as the biggest threat to Steph Curry's 3-point record, right? Because he shoots it at a very good clip, over 40%, and you can see he's got a smooth shot. So, but there's a lot of room for improvement still. He's still a young guy, dude, right? So,
I agree. And for those that don't remember, because Jordan only, nowadays when anybody talks about Jordan, he only won championships, but Jordan ran into a lot of brick walls early on. He was the leading scorer on the team. He was the best defender, but he couldn't get past. And I'd have to look it up, but I think that at the same point in their careers, Anthony Edwards has gotten further up the playoff ladder than Jordan has in the similar.
In the same time span is what
correct.
You're talking about.
Yeah, because Jordan would lose in the first round or the second round. Now, this is the second year that Anthony Edwards has lost in the Western Conference Finals, right? So he's made it to the third round 2 years in a row, but he does need more help.
Absolutely. And that's my weakness. That's what I put as a weakness. They need another scorer. It was very evident, right? As talented as the Wolves are, they took away with the Thunder took away their 2 best players. they were struggling, right? Most teams would struggle, right, if their two best players are taken out. But some, Dante DiVincenzo, who's actually a very good 3-point shooter, he was spotty, right? Nikhil Alexander Walker, another guy, he was spotty. Naz Reid actually had a really, really good series,
So I'm gonna challenge you on that a little bit, Eddie.
Go ahead.
So Naz Reid had a very good offensive series.
Yes,
he did. Defensively, though, he's a poor rebounder.
For his size.
Yes, for his size. His help defense is not all there. So, from an offensive perspective, Naz Reid had a very good series. But from everything else, I would say he had an average to possibly a little below average series.
I think the Thunder made everybody look below average in that series.
That's true.
Honestly.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
So I got to give this relatively, compared to everybody else on the team, Naz Reid stood out versus Anthony Edwards.
That is a fair statement.
Right. And then Rudy Gobert, we know he's limited from an offensive standpoint. He just doesn't have the offensive. I mean, he's a great offensive rebounder. He's a very good defender. We all know that he's all world from a defensive standpoint. But this team, they're limited only from if they run to somebody like this, and if we think that this trend is going to continue, where GMs are going to start stacking up, their roster very similar to the Thunder, it's going to be a very defensive-oriented league, right? It's very possible. So then that means you're going to have to, counter that with a bunch of good scorers, right? And that's or good two-way players. And I think that's probably what's going to continue happening here, is that you're going to see the emergence of a lot of two-way players. That trend has already started. But I think you can see that a lot more as a trend moving forward.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is Rudy Gobert plays the Draymond Green role, or the Tony Allen role, or the historic role of the defensive player that isn't really all that great offensively.
Right.
He plays that role, and what I'm starting to notice is, whether it be Draymond, whether it be Rudy Gobert, whether it be whomever, that role is slowly disappearing because you can't afford to have a guy out there that isn't contributing on both sides of the court, both sides of the court efficiently. And I wouldn't be surprised if Rudy Gobert is traded or moved, because he's a great defensive player, and but he takes up too much of a space when you're playing teams like the Thunder. When you start getting towards the Western Conference Finals and the Finals, you need that position to be versatile on both ends of the court. Yeah,
he might be relegated to become a bench player, right? Someone who gets spot minutes, 10 to 15 minutes per game, right?
Yeah,
kind of like what we have on our team on the Warriors, like a Kevon Looney, like a specialist, or Gary Payton, who's a specialist who comes in spurts to take out a certain player offensively on the other team, right? Rudy Gobert can do that, right?
Yeah.
But you can't rely on that guy to play all 20 to 25 or 30 minutes that a starter typically plays, right? So I agree with you on that front, man. So my overall assessment of this team, so I highlighted two. I said they're definitely a team on the rise, but the only way that they're going to be even close or even better than where they're at right now is they need to get another scorer, right? So we're going to be interested to see if they're going to do a trade in the offseason, draft the player. We're going to talk about next week when we talk about the pre-draft analysis. This is one of the teams that I'm covering. So, we talk about the salary cap and all this room, and we're going to talk about all that and kind of give you an idea of whether or not we think this team is going to make a trade. So anyway, I think small tweaks are needed. Again, the small tweak is needed is just another scorer. But this team is close. They're dangerous, man.
I agree, but in my opinion, Julius Randle can't be your second best player on a championship team. Julius Randle has to be a minimum of the third best player on a championship. So whoever they bring in has to be Robin. They need a new Robin.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So we shall see what happens. But this team is still a problem, man, for years to come. So now we go to the last series before we go into the second half of our the second segment, which is the Player Greatness Index. So we're going to talk about the Knicks and the Pacers. So the Pacers, when we thought the Knicks, when they took out, the Pacers in game, I think it was game 5 there, we thought, this is going to be interesting.
Yep.
What happened here, right? And then, the Pacers came back home and just essentially just turned it on. And to be honest, man, we were very surprised to this point that the Knicks actually made it this far, because they only had a 6.5 player rotation, really, and all these players were playing like massive minutes. I mean, you can see in the table here the minutes here. Of course, the last game is, the game 5 and game 6, look at the Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, those minutes are not ridiculous because I think Thibodeau figured out, I better like spread it out because my guys are starting to get tired. And of course, now Thibodeau's no longer have the job because I think he kind of figured this out a little bit too late. But in games, 1, 2, 3, and 4, he was playing these guys massive minutes, like 40 plus minutes. And now you can see in game 5 and 6, no one got in the 40-minute range because he started distributing the minutes because he needed to, because he figured out his team was getting way too tired, man. Right. So I think
and not only were they getting way too tired, it was on the heels of a season where the top 3 players in minutes played were on the Knicks for the whole season, which I believe that's Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges.
Right.
Those were the top 3 players.
Right.
And Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, I want to say, were 9th and 11th or something like that in that list.
Yep.
So practically 4 of the top 10 most minute players are on the Knicks, and you just can't do that, man. You can't
do it, man. And I would, we'll talk about we can talk about the reactions now. I mean, it's kind of part of this, but let me ask you now that Tom Thibodeau got fired, what are your thoughts, man? I mean, my thought before I hand it over to you is that I think that the GM probably thought, hey, man, I gave you a good enough team to compete, man. It's you didn't necessarily make the choice to go ahead and use the entire roster, and Tom Thibodeau's like, man, you didn't give me enough players to go ahead and do this. But the proof's in the pudding here in the last 2 games. Tom Thibodeau had to do something, right? And won game 5, lost game 6, but a little bit too late, right? Because he figured this out too late. I'm surprised that he was fired. And the main reason being, and I think most people are very surprised that Tom Thibodeau got fired because he had 2 back-to-back 50-win seasons. And this is the first time that the Knicks have been in the finals in 25 years, man. And what do you expect, man? It kind of screams a little bit of dysfunction to me, that it kind of screams a little bit like the ownership we had prior to Lacob at the Warriors, right? Kind of like dysfunction, right? It's like, what are you expecting, man? This team is good as is, with maybe a little bit other guys, maybe that you can trade and get somebody on the bench. But the whole claim is that maybe another voice is needed in the locker room because maybe Tom Thibodeau's voice is kind of waning, thin, with some of these players. But it's possible that was the reason. I think that was the veiled reason. I think that they probably felt that he just beat these guys up. Their players were complaining about playing time during the regular season, and the GM and ownership probably thought that they had enough talent to go ahead and go to the finals, and because they didn't get there, they're firing them.
Yeah. So my thoughts are, I think back to someone like Don Nelson that can get you 50 games but never get you the prize, right? And so I think, kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth here a little bit, I think Tom Thibodeau earned the right to coach the Knicks next season.
For sure.
Okay, without a doubt. But
absolutely.
But if you look at last season and this season, okay, last season the Knicks were one of the highest rated defensive teams in the league.
Yes.
Okay, no Cat. They had Julius Randle. They had Dante DiVincenzo. They had a different kind of makeup, right? They lose.
Yep.
This year they're one of the higher rated offensive teams in the league. Their defense wasn't rated very good.
Yep.
Tom Thibodeau is historically a defensive-minded coach.
Correct.
So when I look at that, I'm going, all right, what happened to our defense? Right? Now, is the defense a lack of the minutes that they played? I don't know. But to me, I feel that although it is premature to get him out, I do feel that Tom Thibodeau is the kind of coach that can only get you to a certain point. Right? Okay. And I think that that's part of what's happening. I think that you and I have talked about it. He needs to give his guys rest. We've been talking about this all season long.
All season.
This is one of the reasons that if we look back at our, obviously we don't have it available right now, but if we look back at our rankings, I think I had the Knicks at the 4th or 5th spot because I just thought they were just going to be exhausted. Not because they didn't have the talent, but just I know how Tom Thibodeau operates. And so I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking, they're thinking he's not the guy. And so earlier in the season, when they let Mike Malone go, I'm thinking, dude, that's the guy.
Oh, the Nuggets. Yeah, when the Nuggets let him go.
Nuggets. Yep. And I, you mentioned Budenholzer, which I don't see it. Like,
well, being the replacement potentially for Tom Thibodeau.
Correct. I don't see it just based on how things have happened.
Right.
I see Mike Malone as the perfect coach for this team because Mike Malone focuses both on offense and defense. He's a pretty equal, balanced coach, in my opinion. He rides the players hard, but which I think is a kind of a New York mentality. So to me, I would not be surprised. I think I mentioned it to you on a text.
Yep.
That part of the reason they let him go is because I think someone like Mike Malone is available, and I think they want to move in that direction.
Or Budenholzer, man, because Budenholzer has a championship. He's already proven to win, right? And that could be the edge that he gets over Mike Malone. But we shall see. We shall see who's right on this one, bro. So
yeah. My money's on Malone. The other guy that we mentioned was Jenkins from Memphis.
Yep.
As a possibility, but my thoughts are on Malone. And I'm sure we'll mention it later. The Phoenix Suns just hired the assistant coach from the Cavs as their head coach, so that's been in place. But yeah. So anyway, I think that's also part of the reason that I think they have a coach that they know is available that they want to hire.
Yep. So moving on to the Pacers before we go on to the analysis of the Knicks. So there's no surprise, man, that the Pacers and the Thunder, the two deepest teams that were in the playoffs, are in the championship, right? I mean, this Pacers team, they are a force offensively, and they started showing that they can play some D a little bit too in spurts. They're nowhere near the Thunder because Thunder do it all game long, whereas the Pacers do it selectively, right? But this team impresses me, man. They're the Run TMP, right? Tyrese, Miles, and Pascal, the Run TMP, like Run TMC Warriors. These are the Run TMP Pacers. They really impress me, man. Because early on in the season, these guys were like kind of just sleepwalking. They weren't really playing well, and then all of a sudden, they just turned on the second half of the season, and they've been a problem. And they're just peaking at the right time, man. So this team, as you can see, the distribution of points and the distribution of minutes, very balanced, man, across the board. I think that they're gonna, in my opinion, I think they're gonna win at least 2 games in the next series. That's what I think.
I think it's going to be a well thought out series, and I absolutely believe the Pacers have the ability to win the series. I by no stretch would I be surprised, but when I look at overall talent and maturity and where they're at, like, to me, I think the Thunder should win.
Oh, right? They should. And in all probability, they will, unless somebody significant gets hurt, right? That's always in the equation. Anytime,
of course, that's always a variable,
right? Like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if he's not there, then it becomes more of an equalizer, right? It becomes anybody's, series at that point. So, all right, man. So let's go on to the the Knicks team
slide.
So this is
all right. So here's I put this one together. So as Eddie mentioned, all the ratings that you see are from the postseason. As we can see, it's no surprise that the starting scoring, they're number one because the starters never come off the floor, right? 93 points a game is what the starters offer. The bench offer very little, and probably of those 15 points, 90% of it was probably from Mitchell Robinson, right? So in terms of their strength, right, the duo of Brunson and Cat on the offensive end, Brunson's a closer, Cat's a great offensive player. He still lacks something on the defense. But their offense
fouls way too much, bro.
Yeah, he fouls way too much.
He's a hack.
He's
what we called back in the day when we played hoops. A hack.
Well, he's reaching for everything because he doesn't want to move his lower body, right? So it's like, and their offensive efficiency, right? They're very kind of efficient in terms of getting Brunson the ball, getting Cat the ball, doing that. Their weaknesses, right, as we mentioned, depth. And this year, well, it's hard to say, but their defense has been very poor. Right, they have been a below-average defensive, and we'll see it next in the coming weeks when we do our analysis of the season. But their defense and depth, right? I was a little generous on the rotation. Really the only rotation is Mitchell Robinson. Miles McBride and Landry Shamet played minutes here and there, so I was being a little generous.
Right.
Yeah, but really Mitchell Robinson and then the starting five. That was, and again, I think small tweaks are needed. Now, when I put this together, I did not think that a tweak would be a coaching change.
Right. I didn't either. I didn't see that either. Nobody saw that coming.
So I think that coming in with a new coach, I think that you're going to get tweaks anyway, right? You're going to get players that the incoming coach likes, players for the bench. So I suspect that the back end of this rotation is probably going to look significantly different in this coming season than it did this particular season. How about you, Eddie? Anything you want to add or comment
No,
on?
I think you were spot on, man. I think that this team is definitely. I mean, their starting five is legit. I mean, you can argue that they're one of the better starting fives in the league. Probably the
Yep.
Denver Nuggets would probably have something to say about that. But after that, it's these guys. From a talent standpoint, it's just that they have no depth, man. Right? They just
Yep.
need a little bit more. They need one more scorer, I think, coming off the bench, right? Like a Jordan Clarkson, someone like that. Although he's not a very good defensive guy, but somebody like that who can just spark. When someone sits like a Jalen Brunson or someone like a Karl Anthony Towns or Mikal Bridges, you have somebody who can pick up the scoring load when those guys are off, right? So that's what I think. They just need that, and I think they're going to be right there again, man. I mean,
Yep.
we'll see what this new coach, who they hire. Again, I think it's going to be Budenholzer. That's my call. You say it's going to be Mike Malone, but whoever it is, it's going to be a really good coach. And their off season, we're going to see what kind of moves they make. If they're going to do another, 5, draft pick trade like they did with Mikal Bridges to get Mikal Bridges, right?
Well,
I don't
think they can do that anymore.
They can't do that, man.
I don't think they have any picks left to trade.
Right, exactly, man. But we'll see, man. I mean, this team is they impress me. They are, anytime the New York team is good in the NBA, that's good for the NBA, and I think they're definitely a team on the rise for sure. It just depends on who they get as a coach and who they draft and who they get as free agents and trades. So we'll find out.
I'll tell you something right now, Eddie. With Tatum being out most likely all of next season,
yep,
this is the Knicks. This incoming season is the Knicks' years to strike. If the Knicks don't strike next season, I'm telling you, they may have missed the window.
I agree with you, man. You're right. I mean, that's a good point about Tatum being out. That opens the door for someone like this team to come up.
Yeah, because they're easily the second best team behind Cleveland for next season.
Yep.
And you could argue maybe better, but whatever.
The Pacers would probably have something to say about that. But
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Good point. I'm forgetting about the Pacers.
Yeah. All right, man. So let's go to the last slide before we get into our player greatness index segment. So anyway, this is just a summary of where we're at right now with respect to overall fantasy points. These are the top 15 on the left. You see the top 15 from a fantasy point standpoint. This is just taking this is accumulating all of the stats like from points, rebounds, assists, turnovers, all that. You get this overall number. And you can see, remember we were talking about Nikola Jokic had this huge lead. Well, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander overtook him. More games means he's going to get more points, right? But you can see that all the guys in red are guys that are eliminated, right? Yep. Now you're not going to see most of these guys are not going to fall out because you're going to need some of these other bench guys, like a TJ McConnell or somebody like that, or Aaron Neesmith kind of overtake some of these other guys on the lower end to kind of start.
Which is probably not going to happen.
What was that?
Which is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen. So a lot of these guys are you're going to see. What you see on the right is the fantasy points per minute. Who is the most efficient? Nikola Jokic is still at the top. You can see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the second best. But you can see the bottom three are Knicks on the efficiency standpoint. Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges. They play a lot of minutes. You can see their points per minute. It's 0.83 down to 0.78 for Mikal Bridges, 0.83 for being Josh Hart. And Mikal Bridges being the least efficient. These guys, they play a lot of minutes. They're to be able to score an efficient clip with those many minutes is tough, especially in the playoffs. So I just want to go ahead and show this for those of you who play fantasy sports. You were setting your lines for the finals. This is the guy that you can guys use to see okay, who makes sense, from an overall standpoint, who does well from a minutes fantasy points per minute standpoint. This is how you go ahead and set your lineups. But you can go ahead and use this as your guide. So, all right, man. So now the next segment. This is our player greatness index. All right. So
here we go.
We have gone over this the last few weeks. Now, these are our stats. Now, this is how we went ahead and created this index and the weighting that we did for each of these categories. Where nothing has changed here. I just want to go ahead and show it for completeness so that you guys all can see what we're doing here, right? So not last week, but the week before that, we went ahead and covered 61 through 76. And you're going to see a ticker down here that's going to show those numbers. And this is our PGI index numbers. You can see relatively, where these players rank against each other from our player greatness index standpoint, right? So you can see the bottom, 61 through 76. You're going to see this ticking all throughout. Now we're going to go ahead and cover the rest. Now our intent is to go through this entire list. Now, we've already 40 minutes into this podcast. Our intent is to stop at an hour and a half. If we go a little bit over, please be patient. we're bringing you some stuff, I think, content that you're gonna like. So let's go ahead and get into it, bro. So the next slide is
Here we go.
All right. So this is the ESPN 51 through 60. The one on the right is ESPN's subjective rankings. The one on the left is our PGI index. You can see the ticker on the bottom. You can see how these players, are essentially relative to the players that you see on the ticker on the bottom. You can see that Kawhi Leonard is number 51 on our PGI index. He's at 2703.4. You can see on ESPN's ranking, he's nowhere on that list. But the legend that you see on the far right tells you, like, okay, if our PGI matches what ESPN's ranking is, you're going to see that in green. So Clyde Drexler matches exactly, right? Clyde Drexler is the same on both. If you see the numbers that are next to that, next to like Reggie Miller, for instance, you can see Reggie Miller's ranked 51 on ESPN's rankings. He's 74 on our index. You can see his number is going to flash across the bottom, so you can kind of see relatively how he is against everybody else. Now, I showed you, how we went about doing this. I'm open kimono. This is what we did, and in previous episodes we talked about the rationale. If you don't agree with it, we love to hear from you. If you tell us we're smoking it, tell us, right? If you tell us that we should go ahead and adjust something, tell us. We definitely we want this to be an evolving thing. We think we have something here. And as I mentioned, I talked to a professional athlete about this, a couple weeks ago, and last week with JJ Stokes. He thought this was like a great idea. And we just have to figure out how we can kind of make this kind of a standard practice that everybody kind of uses, because you can easily use this to figure out, the end of the season award guys, right? We could probably look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander versus, Nikola Jokic versus, Giannis Antetokounmpo. We can see how their numbers are for the season with their end of the season awards, without MVP, of course. And then we can see how they stack up, right? But anyway, so you can see here Pete Maravich and James Worthy. Those are the two that are only 10 slots away from what. Yep. Yeah, they're only 10 slots away, but the rest, all in red. They're all more than 10 slots away. Begs the question, what the hell is ESPN using as far as the rankings?
Yeah, right? I mean, the ones that stand out is Reggie Miller, right? When this was done 3 years ago, I'm sure there was a lot of people that had a lot of firsthand experience of Reggie Miller. But, that is a significant change, right? Yep. ESPN ranked him 51st. We had him 74th, right? Yep. Which means we had him 2 slots away from not making this list at all.
Correct.
Right. So that is quite impressive. And then the players that I like to look at is the players that I never really followed, like Pete Maravich, I never watched. Yep. Willis Reed, I never really watched.
Earl Monroe, Elvin Hayes. Exactly. I mean, these guys are all old school.
Yeah, exactly. Nate Archibald, I remember him a little because my dad loved him. Sam Jones, I only remember him as a coach, yep. Which is so interesting is we have him at 30th and ESPN had him at 60th, which just goes to show you, like, a lot of this to me is not based on statistics. It's not based on what the player actually did. It's based on how fondly we remember them, which is great. That's a different conversation. Right. That's a different conversation. But I want to see, like, for reals, like, how do they stand up against each other? And I watched Clyde Drexler, and I remember at the time thinking Clyde Drexler was really, really good. And based on our thing, he's 53rd on both lists, right?
Yes.
I watched James Worthy, and James Worthy's part of a championship squad, 5 championships, yep. Showtime Lakers, and he's probably the 3rd best player on that team behind Kareem and Magic, and we've got him ranked at 48th. ESPN's got him 56, so we saw him a little bit better than what ESPN did. But yeah, I just find this fascinating. I really, really enjoy looking at where the players I didn't watch rank.
Right. But what's interesting is that, like looking at our PGI index rankings, you can see that Steve Nash, right, is there at 57. I would always, he has 2 MVPs. I would have never thought Gary Payton would be ranked higher than him. Yeah. Nor would I think Damian Lillard would be ranked higher than him. So, that's where a lot of people go, what kind of system are you thinking, man? What are you doing, right? What weighs pretty strongly is the normalized points, assists, rebounds, steals, blocks, all of these things that they accumulate over a period of time. Like Damian Lillard, he's been playing, I think 13 years or whatever it is, 12 years. I forgot how many years, but you compare that to Steve Nash's 16 years or whatever it is. Who was more efficient in that time period, right? That's what this essentially calculates. And that's what you see the difference. That's why you see someone like a Damian Lillard who has no MVPs, maybe being better or having a higher greatness index, potential greatness index, or even, so imagine if this guy won championships or even won MVPs, he'd be a lot higher, right? So this is kind of giving you an idea of, like, relatively speaking, where do the current players, ranks as some of these greats, right? And we pointed out last week or 2 weeks ago that we brought in like a Draymond Green and Klay Thompson, right? Those guys in itself pushed like Bill Walton out of the top, 76 from, our list, and then also pushed out Reggie Miller, right, from our list. So, some of these current players, we haven't factored those guys in there. We're going to do that in future episodes. We're going to go ahead and probably come up with a list of all the current players and where they rank and where they would kind of sit in these rankings, right? So who would be displaced? That'll be for a future show, right? But this is really interesting to see some of these players and how they relate to other players from the past.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is, Steve Nash does have a couple of MVPs, but for those of us who watch them play, for the first, I want to say 3 to 5 seasons, Steve Nash was nobody.
Correct.
Steve Nash didn't do anything. I think he was a bench guy. I don't even think he was a starter, and then at some point after the 5th or 6th season, he started to become Steve Nash. And so you take that into account, right? That's 3 to 5 seasons of really minimal stats, minimal impact, which is probably goes a long way as to why, Gary Payton was pretty much the glove from day one. Damian Lillard was pretty much the man in Portland from day one. So they're accumulating stats from day one, right? And none of those three won a championship. Robert Parrish, who is, one of the big three of the Boston Celtics, of the 80s Celtics, he's got 3 championships. But look, we've got him at 58, even with those championships, which is fascinating to me.
It is. It is.
Yeah. I mean, I would have thought he was way higher. Like you got Kawhi above Robert Parrish,
Right. Kawhi Leonard just got championships himself, so
that's true. He has a couple. That's true, but I'm just saying, like, you think of Robert Parrish, like, okay, he's like,
well, he's like legendary, right?
Yeah, he's like legendary.
You're like, oh man, the Chief. This is the Chief. What are you talking about? The Chief is worse than Kawhi Leonard. Well, our system says so right now. From
the Chief is worse than Clyde Drexler, for example. Like, I wouldn't have figured that, but this is. Now, Dolph Shays, that dude played a long time ago, so I don't got much to say.
I can't either, but it brings some relevance, right, to these old school players. That for those of you that have never seen any of these players, and our audience is kind of mixed, right? We have guys in their 20s and their 30s watching this podcast. A lot of you didn't even know who JJ Stokes was last week when we had him on as our guest, right? I guarantee you that all these players, you're gonna be like, who are these guys? Well, look them up. This is the reason why we want to go ahead and show you that they're relevant, right? So go ahead and look up some of these guys. There could be some, highlights of these guys depending on how long ago they played, right?
Well, and one thing to note, just for some of these players like Dolph Shays, blocks weren't calculated.
Correct.
Right. There's certain stats that they don't even have in their arsenal that other players do. Right. And so those are just missing numbers. Like Wilt Chamberlain, there's a whole bunch of blocks that just are unaccounted for. So when you look at his total points, those, I'm sure there's like 300 to 500 blocks missing there somewhere, that will obviously alter his score. But obviously, because those weren't kept, that's a little bit of a disadvantage to those older players.
Imagine if we did keep all of that. He probably would be the best.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's go to the next guys, man. The next 41 through 50.
All right. Here we go.
So here we have, ESPN's rankings. You can see the disconnects again. Okay. There is nobody green on ESPN side versus our PGI index. And by the way, just so you know, we couldn't necessarily update this ticker on the bottom with those rankings that you saw in the previous slide, because we wanted to kind of show you show you unveil this, gradually. We didn't want to go ahead and show everybody on this ticker so that you guys see, because we want you to be here and see the process, right? Now, next week, we might put the entire ticker here so you can kind of see relatively, throughout the podcast, as you want to listen about our other topics that we're talking about, you can always see that and kind of your own discussions around that with your friends and family about it. So, but anyway, so this one, interesting. Russell Westbrook, he was one of the guys that appeared in the very first slide that we did a couple weeks ago. He was ranked from 61 through 76. I forgot exactly what number he was. But I can go ahead and look that up here shortly.
He was on the first slide.
Yeah, he was ranked. He was number 68 He was 68 on ESPN. Okay, and he's at 41 on ours. And it's interesting because I would say a polarizing kind of player, because a lot of people think that he had a bunch of empty stats, right? Like he's not really that great. He's a triple-double machine. He's going to get overtaken by Nikola Jokic. Let's just face it. He will, right?
Yep.
It's a matter of time. But it just goes to show you Russell Westbrook, how good that player really was. I mean, from an overall standpoint, even though, he doesn't have championships, right, yet, and I don't know if he will get one, he's still a very, very good player. He accumulated a lot of stats, got on first team awards, got on defensive. I don't think he got any defensive teams, but he got NBA second team, third team, these kind of other accolades that give him a little additional points, right? But you can see here from our list, Patrick Ewing, one of the greats, he's number 50 on our list, right?
Correct.
And he was, I think he was on the previous slide, but anyway, he was, I don't know exactly where he's at on ESPN's, but you can see the deltas. Look at Ray Allen. Ray Allen, 65, right? 47 on ESPN's ranking. What? Why is he 47?
James Harden.
What? Yeah, but why is he at 47? Right? I think there's a lot of like what you just said in the last podcast when we talked about this, is that there's a lot of like, oh, I've seen this guy play, and he was awesome, right?
Sentimentality.
Yeah, it's recency bias. A lot of recency bias, right?
Yeah.
So and he's ranked higher than James Harden. That's crazy. And look at James Harden's ranking on our list.
Correct.
He's 18.
Yes.
That's a huge delta.
He's top 20. He is top
20.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy, man?
Yeah.
And you would never think, by all the things you hear about James Harden, that he would even be considered a top 20 player of all time. He is on the top 75, right? He's on the top 75. This is why he's on this list. He's on the top 75. But, he's another polarizing player, right? Because he doesn't play any really defense. He's not really known for his defense. Russell Westbrook also can play defense in spurts, but he was more of a defensive player in college. He became more of an offensive player when he came in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
So
and the other one I take a look at here is Bill Walton, right? You mentioned him the previous slide, but they had him at 44th. We have him at 75th. And if we start ranking some of today's players, he's not even there. He's lower than that. Right.
Way
and I think Bill Walton is the perfect example of sentimentality, right? He had an awesome college career. No one can deny that. Right. But his first 5 seasons with the Portland, they won him a championship. He was a good player, but he was hurt so often. He won a championship with the Celtics, but he was 6th man at best, maybe even 7th man. He's a very much a sentimental figure in the NBA. He's a lovable guy.
Absolutely.
Everyone loves him. And
absolutely.
And if this is a ranking of sentimentality, then sure, we can have him at that level or higher. But when we're actually pulling out statistics, you can see he's the last on the list.
Exactly. And his number is flashing up close. He's coming up in about another 8 ticks. You will see he's less than 2,000 on our index, right?
So I believe he's the only player sub 2,000, right?
He's the only player so far that's sub 2,000. At least he's the only player sub 2,000 on ESPN's top 75. Correct. We have other guys that we have ranked, because we talked, we went ahead and put, Big Shot Bob, Robert Ory, we put Steve Kerr, we did all these other players just to kind of see how it measures up. We haven't revealed that yet, but we will reveal that in time. How they measure up. Devin Booker, how he measures up. All these current players. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we have his number. His number is actually pretty impressive. We'll go ahead and roll that out later. But we wanted to just go ahead and just focus on the top 75, the NBA's 75-year anniversary, and we just wanted to go ahead and compare and contrast our index versus ESPN's subjective rankings. Right?
Yep.
Anybody else you want to talk about?
Yeah. So really quick, the previous slide I touched on. The center for the Celtics, Robert Parrish. Now at 45, here's Kevin McHale. So here's 2 of the top 3 of the Celtics dynasty that don't even crack the top 40. Which is that's amazing. I don't know where Kevin McHale is on the ESPN rankings, but my guess would be that he's higher than the 45th.
Let me see. Kevin McHale. And the thing is, it's hard for me to do it quickly, but he's actually number 45 on our list. He's number 45.
No, I know. Where is he on ESPN's list? Though?
Oh, on ESPN's list is
my guess is
number
he's
39. He's 39.
Yeah. So he would be on our next slide. And then the other one that I would notice, obviously, Allen Iverson. Everyone loves anyone who watched the NBA at that time loves Allen Iverson. They think the world of Allen Iverson. You and I had a one-on-one kind of contest who would be the best one-on-one player, and I was quietly thinking that Allen Iverson might be able to beat Michael Jordan on a one-on-one. You and I were having that discussion. But when you look at it, he's a slap below Russell Westbrook. And like, if you ask any of the older heads, our generation, no one's going to say Russell Westbrook was better than Allen Iverson. They're just not going to say it.
No
I
way.
mean, it's not
sacrilege,
happen,
man.
Right?
It's sacrilege.
Yeah.
Like, what? Are you kidding me? Yeah.
And you look at Isaiah Thomas, right? Argued one of the best point guards in the NBA ever, right? Now that is Isaiah Thomas. That isn't the other Isaiah Thomas.
No,
right?
that's not because Isaiah Thomas, the other one, is not even on the ESPN.
Yeah, that's what I figured, but I wanted to double check before.
Yeah.
And you look at the best.
This is Detroit Pistons guy.
Correct.
Man.
Arguably the best player on the Bad Boys team.
Yes.
Right. He's arguably the best player. Is ranked 44th on our list, and I'm going to bet you that he's top 20 on ESPN's rankings.
Absolutely. Actually, we'll get there when we get there, man. We'll see it, man.
Yeah. Right, so those are the people that immediately jump out to me like, holy crap, Isaiah Thomas is 44.
Right.
I mean, you could say who are the best point guards in the history of the NBA, right? Magic, Curry.
We had that topic,
right?
We talked about episode 48.
Once you get to like 4th or 5th, you're going to say Isaiah Thomas.
Yep.
I mean, you got to get to Isaiah Thomas, and here, 44th. He's below Russell Westbrook, which is crazy.
And the thing is, Twan, is the other thing we could do with this. There's a lot of things that we could do. We can go ahead and rank by position. Our PGI index. We can go ahead and here are the top centers of all time, ranked from 1 to whatever, right? Here are the top point guards of all time, ranked. We haven't done that yet. We can slowly roll that out, but right now we're just looking at this top 75, this top 75 year anniversary team of the NBA. So, all right, man, let's go to the next one. So we're getting to the top 10 here.
Okay, here we go. Soon. Oh my goodness!
There we go. Now look. By the way, one thing that I didn't indicate here is that if you see a player that's bolded, that means they're a current player.
Correct.
Okay, that's the reason why they are bolded. So you can see Anthony Davis on our PGI rankings. He's bolded at number 34, and then you can see Kawhi Leonard on the ESPN. He's bolded in red. I just want to make sure that that we're not calling them out for any other reason. It's just that they're a current player. We want to go ahead and they're going to easily rise up the rankings. One thing I can tell you is that a current player that is on the list, their careers are not over, and the only thing that weighs them down is turnovers. Right? Yep. Turnovers is the only thing that's going to weigh them down. So they're going to continue to climb. Right now, we haven't figured out if there is another way we can make negatives. Maybe fouls. I don't know, because fouls are negative, but.
But fouls, I wouldn't put that as a skill set or something that would matter.
Exactly.
Right? Because here's the fouls are self-punishing, right? So take Rasheed Wallace, right? He fouls out of a game at the second quarter. Well, he gets no stats for the third and fourth quarter, so that's his punishment. You just get no more numbers.
No more stats.
Right, yeah, no more stats, right? Or you're taken to the bench and you don't have the minutes. Right. So in either way, I think fouls are self-punishing on the statistics because you're not producing any.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So now this is where you're going to see on our list. You can see some of these, known players. A lot of these players, a lot of our audience who've probably seen a lot of these players or have heard about these players. Dirk Nowitzki, right? Dirk Nowitzki is at number 31. Anthony Davis, we already covered him. Kevin Garnett. That was an interesting. We were trying to figure out who the top power forwards, and you were definitely, arguing for Kevin Garnett.
I was arguing for Kevin
on the list, right? Rightfully so. Yep. He's actually going to be. Let me see. I think he's lower on ESPN's. But we're not going to. I don't want to keep going back and forth on that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but he's higher than Charles Barkley on this list.
He's higher than Charles Barkley, exactly. Yeah. And you know what? When we did our Mount Rushmore of power forwards, Charles Barkley was the first guy I thought of, right? Yep. Because he was a beast of a power forward, and so was Karl Malone. I even forgot about Kevin Garnett, right? But I didn't forget about Dirk Nowitzki.
But what's funny is, I mean, we're obviously we haven't, but on this list alone, he's the 4th best power forward. If you consider Anthony Davis a power forward, which is what
on this list,
on
this list,
just on this little chart
just
that we're looking at,
right here,
he's the 4th best power forward just on this chart.
Correct. But look at George Mikan, man.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, he's a blast from the past. He's like
Minnesota Lakers.
He played, right?
Yeah.
And look, he's better than Kevin Garnett.
Yep.
So it kind of brings relevance to the old school. That's what I like about this, right?
I agree.
It forces the people who are looking at this, who never heard of these players, go, huh, I've never heard of this player. Let me go look this guy up. Let me see how good he was. Look at his stats. This and that. This is why we're doing this, right? So
and again, I want to echo blocks. What were the two stats that weren't calculated? Was blocks?
Blocks, steals, turnovers.
Blocks, steals, and turnovers. So the turnovers might have hurt him. I don't know how turnover prone George Mikan was, but blocks and steals aren't calculated in his list. So he could arguably been higher in his list if we had blocks. I mean, he was a center. I know his position was a big man, but yeah, and I'm just like Scottie Pippen's 38th, Eddie.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, check this out, bro. So
the best Robin of all time is 38th.
Number 38 on our list. He's 32, so we were not that far off, right? He's 32 on ESPN, so he's 38, so we're relatively close, right? Bob Cousy was the best one that kind of matched to our PGI process, right? He was number 29 on our list. He's 34 on ESPN's list. But the one I want to go ahead and point out here, bro, Bob Pettit. We were talking about power forwards, the best power forwards that you saw on this page on the PGI side. He is number 6 on our list of all-time players. Okay,
and we didn't even bring him up.
Freaking crazy, all right?
Yeah,
because we had in one of our episodes when we talked about episode 48, when we were reviewing our Mount Rushmore that we had done subjectively versus this process that we did.
Correct.
We actually Bob Pettit we weren't even thinking about that guy, right?
No,
Tim Duncan was the guy we thought was the best power forward of all time, right?
Yep.
And everybody argues that. But then when we saw this Bob Pettit, I'm like, oh man, when I saw that, I looked back at him, look at his stats. I started researching his accolades. This guy was a beast, man.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he played at a different time, right? So that's the thing. You can't really, look at a player from back then and how they're gonna. If you plug them in now, how they're gonna do, right? It's a total.
It's not. You got to judge them on the time that they played. That's exactly what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
That's exactly what we're doing here, man. Yeah. Right. So, but anyway, I just wanted to bring that out. So, and we came a little closer with, Kevin McHale. We're only, within 10 slots. Patrick Ewing, he was right at that cusp of 10 slots. Rick Barry, I should have went ahead and actually no, he's 12 slots, so I didn't highlight him, so he's still red. So, but you can see Steve Nash, big difference, 20 slot difference. Ours say he's at 57.
Yep.
ESPN says he's at 37. So what is, dude? You know what? Hold on, something happened to my battery. Hold on, let me go ahead and I'm gonna come back, man. My batteries are running out.
Okay. All right. Well, while you're doing that, I'm looking at Dwayne Wade, which was interesting because I believe we had Dwayne Wade as one of the Mount Rushmores for our off guards, right? Dwayne Wade was one of our Mount Rushmore, and here he's in the top. He's 40th, right, for our list.
Yep.
And I believe we went back and forth. I don't remember if we decided to submit him or not, but I know we were having a discussion around him. And this is just, Willis Reed, who, is remembered for the game that he came in and, played hurt and all of that. But, Willis Reed was a hell of a player at 37th. I wouldn't have ranked him that high. I wouldn't have either. Lower than that, And we had mentioned Billy Cunningham. I only remember Billy Cunningham as the head coach for the Sixers when Dr. J was playing. I don't remember him as a player at all. And
what's interesting, Twan, is that you and we're hoop heads, big time, right?
Yep.
We appreciate the NBA. We appreciate the history of the NBA.
Yep.
And dude, if we had not come up with this idea and concept, I would have never thought about these players myself.
Yeah.
And I am like a hoop head. I know the history and I know who's who. But man, some of these players like George Mikan, I'm like, okay, I've heard the name, right? Yeah. But come on, man, he's like old school. He can't compare to like a Charles Barkley or a Shaq, whoever, right? But this is what brings the relevance to some of these old school players. It forces us to look at some of these guys and their stats and really compare them, right, against some of the guys that we see here today on TV when we watch games, right? So, all right, man. All right, so let's go on to. We are slowly getting there, man. We are now at 21 and 30. Let me go ahead and slide down here and right. All right. Again, for the audience, we can't necessarily update the ticker on the bottom. We wanted to roll this out slowly. So this is why you're seeing only 61 through 75 on the bottom ticker. For next week's show, we're going to have the entire list. So you can go ahead and see this entire list and have conversations about this with your friends and family. But anyway, all right. So here is, again, ESPN's list is very different from ours.
Very
Right?
different.
The only
Very
two
different.
that actually are close are David Robinson and George Mikan. Now, George Mikan appeared in the previous slide, right?
Correct.
But
Yep.
he's ranked number 28 on ESPN's. We have him at 32. That's close. But Chris Paul is completely what? He's 29th, man. 29th on ESPN's all-time list.
No, Eddie, the big discrepancy here is John Stockton.
John Stockton's another one. I know that's huge. He's at 24 on ESPN's list. He's at 71 on our list.
That's crazy to me, dude.
I know. I agree with you, man. And the reason, though, but you know what? You know what? The biggest reason, the biggest contributing factor as to why John Stockton isn't as high. Now, steals, it's 75%, right? We blocks we did at 75%. We did turnovers at -1. Points are all points, right? But what we did is for an assist, okay? Because an assist is very dependent on another player to go ahead and let me go ahead and turn this thing off, man, because my phone is. I should turn this thing off as a ringer, but anyway, sorry about that, guys. Anyway, John Stockton, he's the highest assist guy we've ever had, right?
Correct.
But we made a decision that in order to measure a player's greatness, we had to kind of look at how that player contributes, right?
Yep.
And John Stockton, in order for him to get the assist stat recorded, he's dependent on somebody else making the basket.
Correct.
So we made that, okay, for that person, what's his contribution? Really 50%, really, right? So that's why we went ahead and made that. So that's a big hit to somebody like John Stockton.
It is.
Magic Johnson, because that's what he's known for. And steals. Steals is what he's known for, and assists. But steals are at 75%, and then, assists are at 50%. So he's getting
and this is a good question for the crowd. If you guys feel like assists should be weighted heavier, you heard our logic why we did it at half a point, because it's a combination of two people. Now, granted, there are, just playing devil's advocate here, if Magic is serving you a pass underneath the hoop where you're wide open and you dunk, is that really half a point? I mean, he pretty much got you the ball with, you have to do very little to score. But at the same token, when John Stockton throws a last-minute pass to someone in the corner and they make a three or a deep two back in the day because they didn't shoot many threes, now what's that assist worth? Like 0.25 because the other player saved your bacon.
That's the thing, bro. It's like we couldn't, because that becomes a very subjective.
It is a very subjective thing.
And we had to make this as objective as possible. Again, you could go ahead and dispute the system. You can dispute the system, because we're asking for you guys, the audience. And by the way, we're here live. And for those of you who have some questions or comments, please feel free. Go ahead and post those if your platform allows that. But we're here for you because we want to hear from you. All right. But if you're telling us that, hey, man, come on, man, the assist should be, weighed more. Because, in fantasy sports like FanDuel, DraftKings, the assist is like 1.5 points. Right. A point is a point, 1.3 points is 3, but assist is like 1.5 points. A rebound is 1.2 points. A steal and a block are 3 points, right? Yep. We do that, man. It changes this whole thing.
And that's fine. And I'm open to having that discussion, but we've explained the logic of why.
Correct.
That's
exactly it, man. But John Stockton was a big surprise to me too, because he was one of the first guys after Magic when we did our Mount Rushmore of the best point guards of all time. Those are the first two that came to our minds. Magic was first, John Stockton was second, right? And that's interesting, is that we're going to do a future show where we're going to go ahead and rank all the players by position of all time using our index. And I think those are going to be very surprising results, man. So
I agree.
But what's interesting is, Karl Malone, is slightly ranked higher against John Stockton on ESPN's list. But on our list, there's a huge discrepancy. Huge. So Karl Malone's a top 12 player on our list.
Correct.
Okay? So, and look, another guy that's a big delta that's coming up here is John Havlicek.
Yes.
Right? He's top 10. You're going to see, his numbers as it relates to everybody else. So, for those of you who are watching this, you can take pictures of this, rewatch this, look at the numbers. You can come up with your own list. You can see, but we'll roll it out next week. But you can see, as we're running here, you can take pictures, go back and listen to it, and take pictures and kind of have these discussions with your friends and family who are hoop heads and see what they say. This is going to be interesting. So this is what we want. So any other guys you want to point out here before we go on?
Just the logo, Jerry West at 23rd. I would have thought maybe he's a little bit higher. Moses Malone, the original high school player to come into the NBA, right? Very, very powerful player, very good player. I don't know if I'd have had him at 25th. I don't know where, again, I'm not going to ask you to look, but I believe he's probably ranked later in ESPN's rankings. I don't think he's higher than what we're looking at. So I believe we have him ranked higher, which I think is appropriate. Rick Barry, who was, up until Steph Curry joined the Golden State Warriors, was the Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors. He was the face and the man, and we got him at 26, so that's interesting. Jerry Lucas, if I remember right, he had a challenging career, a lot of drugs related things, if I remember correctly.
No, you're talking about John Lucas.
Was it John Lucas? Okay, not Jerry
John
Lucas. Okay, my bad.
Yeah.
Okay, and then and I'm kind of looking at these players. The Admiral, I think the Admiral's ranked right about where I would expect him.
And we're not that far because we have him at 22 and he's at 25 on ESPN. So that's the only him and George Mikan are the only two that are green. Now we're gonna get a lot more greens as we get closer to the top. So so we'll go on to the next list, man. So
all right, here we go.
All right, so we got 11 through 20. Now you can see there's more greens. Okay.
Yep.
You can see it. But there is a red there. Dirk Nowitzki's a red. Okay. On our list, he's 31. On ESPN's, he's 17. But you can see here that we're starting to see a lot more greens now. Now, I want to point out here, one guy that I forgot to bold on ESPN's is Steph Curry as well as Giannis. I should have bolded, and Kevin Durant. I should have bolded those on ESPN side. I only bolded those on the PGI side. But you can see some of the current players, they're starting to stack up against some of these greats now, right? And I know the first thing that people are going to see, how in the heck is James Harden higher ranked than Steph Curry? Right? You and I had a conversation about this, and he's a 1.4 points better. And the only reason, bro, he's got more assists, more steals, more points. I think he's got one or two more all NBA team awards. But you argue, hey, Steph has got championships, right? And he's got a finals MVP, right? So, and he's got MVPs. So how did this happen? Well, that's why we did this, right? The numbers spit out something. There's no bias to this. This is what the system said, right? Now, we can argue that we can put more points to, a championship, a finals MVP. We went through our process. We're not going to explain it again, but we explained it in previous episodes. But, you're going to see why we did this. And I know this is the one that most people are going to go, dude, this system's just wet. This is whack, right? Because there is no way you can say James Harden is better than Steph Curry. Now, both of their careers are not over. We'll see, right? But, James Harden goes to show you, he's actually a pretty underrated great. I mean, he's on the top 75 players of all time for a reason, because he's a good player. Now, when I saw this too, bro, I was very, very surprised. I was like,
the names that jump out to me right away is 11 and 13, Magic Johnson and Kobe Bryant, not even in the top 10. Either one. That is just like, whoa.
I know.
And
Isn't that crazy, man?
Hakeem is our guy. Hakeem is 15th. You're like, what?
Yes. And Shaq is argued to be one of the top 10s of all time too. And
correct.
He's at 17.
Yeah,
right?
But he's below Hakeem.
Right. Right.
This list is. But what's funny is, yes, and again, we need to see who's in the top 10 before we start. But Oscar Robertson was a great player. He's outside of the top 10. There's definitely, if I'm looking at this list, the players that automatically jump to me that I would have thought are in the top 10 would have been Magic, Kobe, Steph, and Durant.
Right.
Those would be that I would think they're in the top 10. Now, when we get to the top 10, we'll see what's there. But, this is, and, Hakeem's a greater center than Shaq, which I've always felt that way anyway. But it's good to see, my feelings confirmed. But this is an impressive list on the left, and on the right, they got Dr. J at 14th. Obviously, we can see that Dr. J is going to show up on the next slide. Oh, they did have Moses Malone at 15th. They did have him higher than we did.
They did have him higher.
Yep. They had Steph Curry at 16, so we've got him 4 slots. Dirk Nowitzki, we mentioned him already. He's a big difference. Jerry West, we had him lower than what they had. Shaq, I think Shaq's a big sentimental pick, because Shaq's just, he's Shaq. And, obviously that him having the love that he has had him 6 picks higher than we have.
Yep. But interesting, huh, man? Interesting process here that we're seeing here. a lot of big surprises. We'd love to get your reaction, audience.
Yeah.
Please post up any comments or questions, even after when this podcast go ahead and re-airs on the platforms tomorrow. Go ahead. If your platform allows it to go ahead and post a comment, please do so. We invite that. We want to hear from you. This is why we're doing it live, right? We want to hear from you.
Yeah, so, we want to hear if you guys agree, how you guys weight it. If you haven't seen some of these players on the list, go to YouTube, look at a couple of those players and see, what their impact was. I'm sure there's people here that haven't on this, that will be listening to this or listening that haven't watched Oscar Robertson play,
right.
or maybe never watched Karl Malone play or Akeem play. The footwork on Akeem is phenomenal. He's the best. He's got the best feet as a center, in my opinion, in the history of the NBA.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's not even close.
Yeah. And so watch him play before you start yelling that, Giannis should be better than Akeem or Giannis should be better than the Big O. Before you start doing that, go take a look.
Yeah. And it's interesting, just to bring it back to one of the episodes that we had in the past is when we had trying to crown the best one-on-one player of all time.
Yep.
And it came down to Akeem versus Jordan.
It did.
And, we were kind of battling back and forth. We both said Akeem, right? And people were like, "What? No way!" But then we asked the AI, right? AI, like, who would win? And it said Akeem. Oh, okay, so we're not that far off. We're not that crazy,
that far
right?
off,
right? So,
all right,
man. So now
here we go. Drum roll.
10. All right.
Drum roll. All right. Before everyone flips out here, these are the numbers.
Yep.
If you don't like the list, tell us how the numbers should be changed. But keep in mind, whatever number we change, if we make assist worth a point, it's going to change everybody, right? So not only will it bring, if you're a Stockton fan, for example, it's not only going to bring Stockton up, 30 slots. It's also going to push up Magic Johnson, 9 or 10 slots or whatever. So just keep that in mind. This is the beauty of the system. Whatever does to one, it does to all. So just keep that in mind. All right, here we go.
All right, man. So here's the top 10. Look at all the greens, bro. Look at all the greens. All right.
Okay.
Now, ESPN. This is always the argument. Who's better, Michael or LeBron? All right. Yep. Well, ESPN says Michael Jordan. We also say Michael Jordan. But look at the relative difference, man.
Yeah.
LeBron is number 5 on our list.
Correct.
Michael Jordan's number 1. But look at Michael Jordan's number. 5,491.3 points. You can see on the ticker below, 70, 75, 76, how far off they are, right? Yep. I mean, look at Bill Walton. He's like, 3 times worse almost, right?
Yep.
So it goes to show you, like Will Chamberlain, a lot of people I was surprised by that because I thought Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would be number 2.
Yeah. We actually talked about it with JJ on the last show, how both JJ and I felt like he might be the greatest player ever.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
JJ mentioned, but again, in that conversation, JJ mentioned his college career, which here doesn't give him 1 point. That's 0
1 point for his college career.
Yeah,
exactly, man.
Yeah.
But Bill Russell, he was the one that could sway this whole thing, right? Because he has the most championships out of anybody in the 75 anniversary team. He has 11, right? Now, we went ahead and didn't give as many points to a championship. I think we the number that we came up with was 80 points. That's what we came up with. And the way how we got there is that, we for a regular season MVP, we weighed that higher. And how we got to that point is, in the history of the NBA, if you look at all of the number of teams that were in the NBA at any one time, if you look at the mean or the average, it was 15. So 15 teams in the whole history of the NBA. We didn't want to put 30 because, some of those old school teams didn't have 30 teams. So we didn't want to we want to make this fair. So we thought that 15 would be the average of the amount of teams that we have in the NBA. And so there's 15 teams, then you have 10 players on the court at one time, and then you go ahead and multiply those two, you get 150. So we awarded 150 points for an MVP. So then we're looking at, a championship, that's not an individual thing. That's a team thing. So if we want to individualize it, we want to kind of make it maybe not half, but a little bit more than half of 150. So that's why we weighted it to 80. So that's how we went about doing it. Because if we went ahead and put a bigger emphasis on, championships, Bill Russell would just dominate everybody on this list.
And again, it's how you want to weigh it.
It's how you want to turn the knob, bro.
Yep.
Right? Whatever knob you turn is going to affect everybody else on this list. Right?
Well, you know what's fascinating here, Eddie, is I'm looking at this list, and again, I don't know all the great Celtics teams, but I believe, at least I know Havlicek played with Bill Russell. Did Bob Pettit play with Bill Russell?
No, he did
No.
not. No.
Okay. So there's two of the top 10 from the 60s Celtics era.
Yep. You got let me see the Celtics there. So you got Bill Russell and Larry Bird.
John Havlicek.
And John Havlicek. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Then those are the only teammates in this list.
Oh, I got you. That are teammates. Okay. Now I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Everybody else. Yeah. See, Larry Bird.
Individual.
No. Yeah. Everybody else is individual. That's a good observation. And the only Tim Duncan being the only Spur on this list, because you got, of the Lakers, you got Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and well, LeBron is a Laker right now, but he hasn't been historically, right? Then you got who else? You got Michael Jordan being the only Bull, and then you got LeBron being the only real Cav. He was an old school. I forgot what team he played for, but it's an old school team.
Wasn't he the St. Louis Hawks? Is that
something like that? That's what it was. St. Louis Hawks. It was the Hawks. It was the Hawks. Yep. Yes, correct.
Yep.
And then you got Julius Erving, Dr. J. That one surprised me, man. Dr. J being on the top 10 really surprised me, because you and I were arguing about him maybe even being on our Mount Rushmore.
Yeah,
and you were right.
Yep.
You were right, man. I didn't think he deserved to be there.
And just so everyone recalls, we talked about this before. We grabbed Dr. J's ABA stats as well. ABA was a league that was a competitive league against the NBA, and the ABA pretty much bottom, put them into the league. So those stats are not all quote unquote NBA league stats, but they are because they acquired that league. So those stats are all combined into one. But I mean, you look at this, Tim Duncan's the only Spur. Yeah. I mean, you got a couple of Lakers. Will Chamberlain was a Laker for a while. Kareem was a Laker. LeBron James is currently a Laker, but none of those players played together.
Right. But remember the thing that we brought up last week. There's always been this dispute from the old, the players, or the people that watch the game, as long as we have. And there's always been that long argument who's better between Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, because they both essentially came in at the same time. They were rivals in college. They became rivals in the NBA. And then, there was always discussion about, Larry Bird, because of his complexion, of his skin, they felt like the media gave him all this airtime because of the complexion of his skin being very different than everybody else that was in the NBA. And it became kind of a controversy as to why he was getting so much attention. Even someone, I forgot who called him out, saying that, man, if that guy was black, he would be average, right? Yeah. And I forgot who said that. Somebody said that back in the day. Yeah. And my general sentiment was, okay, why are they making a big deal out of this guy? Because he did a lot of the same things I saw maybe some of the other guys. But then as I look back, dude, this guy was hecka good, dude. He was hecka good.
Oh, he was a fantastic player.
He was hecka good. I mean, like, this guy, his game translates to today. He could play now, right? Because he can rebound well, he can dribble well, he can shoot well, he can pass really well, right? Defensively, he may not be as athletic. That he might be kind of torn down by somebody like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or whoever who can just break people down. But this guy was an all-around good player, man. And the PGI Index says that he's a better player than Magic, and I agree with that. Although I didn't necessarily agree with that prior, but I can see now as this process forces me to look at the stats and look at their history, and he's definitely a better player.
Yeah, no, and what's interesting is for us, we kept him at the exact same number ESPN did. It's just Magic dropped to the 11th, not the 4th.
Right.
So, and Bob Pettit is nowhere in the top 10 for
ESPN.
For ESPN. Yep. And someone that in a million years, Eddie, I would have never put in the top 10. Just
I agree.
Every other name here,
you can make a case for.
I can make a case for, but John Havlicek is another one, right? And John Havlicek, as of right now, is the only player in our system in the 3,000 range in the top 10.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Good observation, man. So, So, one thing that I'll go ahead and kind of come in a future episode is, like I said, we're going to rank the best, at each position of all time. And then we're going to come up with like, a list of the current players that would essentially, displace some of these top 75 guys. We'll come up with like a list of all the, the current players, who are considered the best. I mean, you can see right now, LeBron is the current player. He's the best right now, right? But thereafter, you saw like names like Giannis Antetokounmpo, you saw Steph Curry, you saw James Harden, you got, Kevin Durant, but there's other guys that we haven't put in here, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, right? He is actually on this list. He actually would be, probably in the 12 to 13 range, right around there, right? Because his number is like 37 and some change, which, we'll go ahead and bring that up in a future show. But the beauty of this whole system is it kind of makes you look at a player's overall greatness. There's a number that's put to it, right? It's like a stock, right? The value of this player over his career. And the thing is that these players who are already retired, their number's not going to change. It's frozen. That's it. It's not ticking anymore. It's frozen. But LeBron, Durant, all these current players, Steph Curry, their careers are still going. So they can only go up from here, right? Now, a guy like an Anthony Edwards, who's very, very young, accumulating a lot of stats, he's going to be somebody to watch out for, especially if he stays healthy and doesn't create.
Correct.
Same with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. In my opinion, I think the biggest threat to maybe the top 5 or 6 in this list is Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic, he's going to be the guy that's going to penetrate, maybe even challenge maybe Kareem if he wins championships. He has to win championships, though. If he doesn't win championships, he won't get there. He'll be probably right around where Larry Bird is, right? If he doesn't win any more championships moving forward. But we're going to do that in a future episode. We're going to go ahead and go over all the current players.
Yep. And for you in the out in the interwebs there in the World Wide Web, that, the argument for greatest player, Michael Jordan or LeBron, well, at least regardless, the argument is closer to Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain than it would be between Michael Jordan and LeBron.
Correct.
LeBron can still accumulate points. Whether he'll earn another, 600 points, unlikely in my opinion. Given the remaining of his season, but you never know. It's still possible. But right now, he's behind. The other fascinating thing on this story on this list is of the top 5, 3 are centers.
Yeah,
and the center position has really, it's now with Joker coming back again, but it really has been diminished in the last decade, and so this is going to be really interesting, a dynamic, right? So, one would argue height rules in the NBA,
It does, though. It does.
Height rules in the NBA.
It does.
Yeah,
it's a big man's game, man. Right?
Yeah,
it is.
There's no short guys on this list. I'll tell you that.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait. That's it for our show. Hey, dude, Twan, we're at an hour and 27 minutes, man. We did it. So
hour and a half.
We went ahead and covered the NBA playoffs. We're gonna have our finals starting tomorrow between the Pacers and the Thunder. We covered the series that led up to this. We went ahead and did some parting shots for the Knicks and the Wolves and what we thought, what they should be doing for next season. What are their strengths and weaknesses, how they can improve. We went over like the fantasy, portion of our segment where we talked about, all the guys that are playing in the playoffs right now. We accumulate all their stats and we can kind of see who are the best performers. For those of you who play fantasy sports for, FanDuel or DraftKings, anything like that, you can go ahead and use this as a guide for that. And then we went ahead and, talked a little bit about the Tom Thibodeau firing, right? That was a very surprising development. We didn't think that he deserved to be fired. Yeah. I think most of the people out there had that same sentiment. He did not deserve to be fired because that guy had 2 back-to-back 51 seasons, and first time that the Knicks have been relevant in the finals, conference finals in 25 years, right? And then they went ahead and fired him. It just does not make sense. That leads me to believe that they had somebody else on their mind that could do it. Twan says it's Mike Malone. I'm saying it's probably going to be Budenholzer. We'll see who was right. No lunches on that, just more bragging rights, bro. So, but anyway, and then we went ahead and dovetailed into this PGI index. We went ahead and compared the ESPN rankings versus the PGI rankings that we came up with, that we developed about a month ago, and it's brought a lot of great content, right? And I think the audience is appreciating this because these have been our highest viewed shows that when we roll this thing out. I think you guys like this and appreciate this. We just want to hear from you. Please tell us what we should adjust, right? And we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do a segment on, hey, so-and-so said that we should go ahead and put more points on this. Let's see what happens, right? We'll do that. No problem. It's easy to change. No problem. We can do that. So, but anyway, so this is our show for this week. We went, we're here every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And, I'm Eddie Aparicio. This is Anthony Twan Corral. We're also known as the Cisco Kids. You can go ahead and find us on grumblingsmedia.com, as well as any popular podcast outlet you can think of, such as YouTube, Pandora, Spotify, Google, X, Facebook, you name it. Just type up Grumblings Media, and you can go ahead and find us. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and be here next week. Until then, have a good rest of the week, and we are signing off.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.